For nearly 6 years, Genshin Impact has been asking us the same questions. What happened to Khaenri'ah, who truly controls Celestia? Why were the 7 chosen? But after the newest teaser, we might finally be looking at the answers. Because this wasn't just another trailer, it was a roadmap for the final chapters of Teyvat. And hidden within it are clues that could completely change everything we thought we knew. Welcome to Quest Archives, I'm Lunatic, and today we're analyzing everything hidden inside Genshin Impact's latest teaser and what it tells us about the future of Teyvat. For years, the Fatui have followed the same pattern. Every nation, every mission, every harbinger, all working toward a single objective that's collecting all the 7 gnosis. At first, it looked like a simple power grab, a nation trying to overthrow the gods, but the latest teaser suggests something far more calculated. For the first time, we hear the name Project Stuzha, and while Oyoverse has revealed very little about its true purpose, the name alone changes how we should look at the Fatui, because projects are not spontaneous, they are planned, structured, built over years, which means everything the Fatui have done across Teyvat may have been preparing for this very moment. We know that Saritsa has been gathering the gnosis through the Harbingers. We know Pierro founded the Fatui after surviving the fall of Khaenri'ah. We know several Harbingers have acted independently, yet every mission has ultimately served the same larger goal. Until now, we've assumed the destination was simply the collection of the gnosis, but perhaps that was never the destination, but only the preparation. So what could Project Stuzha actually be? One possibility is that the gnosis are not weapons, they are keys. Individually, each gnosis represents divine authority over an element, but together they may unlock something much greater, something sealed, something hidden since the cataclysm. If that's true, then the Fatui were never collecting power for themselves, but they were assembling the pieces of a much larger mechanism. And this brings us back to Pierro. Unlike the Archons or the Traveler, Pierro witnessed the destruction of Khaenri'ah firsthand. He spent 500 years preparing for another confrontation with the heavens. It would be unlike him to rely on hope. Instead, he would create a contingency, a plan that could continue even if individual harbingers failed. Project Stuzha feels exactly like that. Not a mission, but a culmination of 5 centuries of preparation. Looking back, every harbinger suddenly takes on a new role. Dottore pushed the limits of human knowledge, Pantalone secured unimaginable wealth, Arlequin built an intelligence network spanning every nation, Sandrone advanced technology, Capitano strengthened the Fatui's military influence, Colombina remains an unknown variable. Alone, these accomplishments seem unrelated, but together they resemble the foundations of something much larger than a military organization. They resemble the infrastructure needed to reshape an entire world. Which raises one final question. What if the Fatui never saw the Archons as their true enemy? What if every confrontation we've witnessed in Mondstadt, Liyue, Inazuma, Sumeru, Fontaine and Natlan was merely another step towards confronting something else, someone far above the Seven? Because if Project Stuzha is finally beginning, then perhaps the Fatui have already finished preparing, and the real war has yet to begin. For years, Celestia has remained silent, while nations fell, while gods died, while the Fatui collected the Gnosis one by one. The heavens never intervene, at least not openly. But the latest teaser may have changed everything, because for the first time in years, it appears that two of the four shades are stepping into the story. According to the oldest records in Teyvat, the primordial one did not rule alone. Alongside it existed four mysterious beings, the Four Shades, entities believed to possess authority beyond that of the Archons themselves. Throughout Genshin's story, we've only caught fragments of their influence, a name here, a forgotten legend there, but never direct involvement until now. That raises an important question. Why reveal them now? The timing cannot be ignored. The Fatui have gathered nearly every Gnosis. Khaenri'ah's secrets continue to surface, the traveler grows closer to discovering the truth behind the cataclysm, and suddenly Celestia's oldest servants begin to appear. That doesn't feel like coincidence. It feels like a response. Throughout the game, many players have asked the same question. Why didn't Celestia stop the Fatui? Why allow the Gnosis to be taken? Why remain silent for many years? Perhaps because intervention was never necessary. Imagine a king watching a rebellion unfold. If the rebels never became a true threat, why reveal your strongest soldiers? But if that rebellion suddenly succeeds, everything changes. The appearance of the Shades may suggest that humanity has finally crossed the line. Since the beginning of Genshin Impact, we've often thought of the Archons as the highest authority in Teyvat. Yet, every new chapter has challenged that assumption. They answered Celestia, they received their Gnosis rather than creating them. Several Archons have openly questioned the Heavenly Order. Others have surrendered their Gnosis without much resistance. Perhaps because they understand something we don't. Perhaps the Archons were never meant to rule. They were caretakers, admins, while the true architects of the world remained hidden above. Even the teaser itself reinforces this idea. The visual language surrounding these figures is unlike anything associated with the Archons. Their presence feels distant, ancient, almost untouchable. Oyoverse isn't introducing another powerful character, they're introducing a completely different level of authority, one that may redefine everything we've learned about Teyvat. Here's where my theory begins. What if Celestia has never feared the Fatui or the Abyss? What if the only beings capable of threatening Celestia are the Four Shades themselves? Throughout history, every major catastrophe seems connected to forces far older than the Seven. The fall of Khaenri'ah, the cataclysm, the destruction of ancient civilizations. What if the Shades are not merely servants, but the true instruments through which Celestia maintains order? If that's the case, then the appearance of two Shades isn't simply a teaser for future bosses. It's a declaration Celestia has finally decided to act. For years, we've asked whether the Traveler would one day confront the Fatui or the Abyss. But perhaps those were never the final enemies. Perhaps they were only obstacles on the road to something far greater. Because if the four shades are finally entering the story, then the age of Archons is coming to an end, and the true rulers of Teyvat are finally stamping onto the stage. But if Celestia is moving, then another ancient power cannot remain silent forever. Khaenri'ah. 500 years ago, Khaenri'ah was destroyed, or at least that's the story we've been told. A nation erased, its peoples cursed, its cities reduced to ruins, a civilization lost to history. But after years of exploring Teyvat, that explanation no longer feels complete, because every major event in Genshin's story seems to lead us back to the same place, Khaenri'ah. Consider everything we've learned so far. Pierru came from Khaenri'ah. Dainsleif came from Khaenri'ah. Capitano survived Khaenri'ah. The Abyss Order was born from the aftermath of Khaenri'ah. Even the Traveler's sibling became deeply connected to its fate. For a nation that supposedly disappeared, Khaenri'ah continues to shape the entire world, almost as though it never truly left. Perhaps the cataclysm wasn't the end of a war. Perhaps it was only the beginning. For 5 centuries, every major faction has been preparing for something. The Fatui gather the noses. The Abyss searches for its own path. Dainsleif walks alone. Celestia remains silent. None of these groups trust each other, yet all of them are connected by one shared event: the fall of Khaenri'ah. And that raises perhaps the biggest question in all of Genshin Impact. Why was Khaenri'ah destroyed? Was it truly punished for defying the gods? Was it punished for creating forbidden technology? Or did it discover something it was never meant to know? The deeper we look into Teyvat's history, the more it feels as though knowledge itself is treated as a threat. Forbidden research, Irminsul, the Abyss, even Doctor's experiments. Time and time again, those who seek the truth find themselves in conflict with the heavens. Here's where my theory begins. What if Khaenri'ah wasn't destroyed because it was evil, but because it was becoming independent? Think about it. It was a nation without an Archon, a civilization built by humanity alone, one that developed advanced technology without relying on divine authority. If Khaenri'ah continued to grow, it might have proven that humanity no longer needed Celestia, and if that happened, the entire system governing Teyvat could collapse. From that perspective, the cataclysm wasn't simply a punishment. It was a warning, a message to every nation that dared follow the same path. Yet despite everything, Khaenri'ah's ideals never disappeared. They survived through Pierro, through the Fatui, through Dainsleif, through the Abyss, even through the Traveler's Journey. Every road now seems to lead back to the same forgotten kingdom, not because Khaenri'ah is returning as a nation, but because its unanswered questions are finally catching up with Teyvat. If the Four Shades are stepping into the light and Project Stuzha is finally beginning, then perhaps we are witnessing something much larger than another regional conflict. Perhaps we are watching the final chapter of a war that began 500 years ago. A war between humanity and the heavens. A war that Khaenri'ah never truly lost. Because even in ruin, its legacy continues to shape the fate of the entire world. But if every faction is moving toward the same conflict, then one question still remains. Where does the Traveler fit into all of this? Since the very beginning of Genshin Impact, the Traveler has played the role of an outsider, moving from nation to nation, solving each region's crisis, meeting Archons, confronting Harbingers, searching for answers. But despite everything we've witnessed, the Traveler has never truly chosen a side, until now. Because Snezhnaya may be the first nation where neutrality is no longer possible. At first, our goal seemed simple: find our sibling, speak with the Seven, discover the truth behind this world, but every new nation has changed that objective. Mondstadt introduced freedom. Liyue questioned contracts. Inazuma challenged eternity. Sumeru exposed the dangers of forbidden knowledge. Fontaine questioned justice itself. And Natlan forced us to confront sacrifice. Looking back, it no longer feels like 7 separate stories. It feels like 7 lessons, preparing the Traveler for one final decision. Every nation we've visited has asked us to solve a problem. Snezhnaya may ask something much harder: to decide who deserves our trust. The Tsaritsa, the Archons, Celestia, or our sibling. Perhaps none of them? Because for the first time in the story, the Traveler may not be fighting to save a nation. They might be deciding the future of Teyvat itself. What if the Traveler never reaches Snezhnaya as an enemy of the Fatui, but as an unexpected ally? Think about everything that's happened so far. Several Archons willingly gave up their noses. Others choose not to stop the Fatui. Even characters who oppose the Harbingers often hint that the situation is more complicated than it first appears. What if the Tsaritsa has been preparing for a threat that only a Descender can confront? The Traveler isn't bound by the laws of Teyvat. They aren't recorded by Irminsul. They stand outside the world's natural order. If anyone can challenge the system created by Celestia, it might be the Traveler. And perhaps that's exactly why the Tsaritsa has allowed events to unfold as they have. But there is one final obstacle: our sibling. Since the beginning of our journey, they have insisted that we continue traveling, to see the truth with our own eyes. What if Snezhnaya is where those two paths finally converge? Not in battle, but in understanding. What if both siblings have been moving towards the same destination, simply by different roads? Every battle the Traveler has fought until now has tested their strength. Snezhnaya may test something far more important, their beliefs. Because what happens if the people we've called villains are trying to save the world? What happens if the gods we've trusted are hiding the greatest lie in Teyvat's history? And what happens if there is no right choice, only consequences? If that's true, then Snezhnaya won't be remembered as the nation of the Cryo-Archon. It will be remembered as the place the traveler stopped searching for answers and finally chose a side. But if every road now leads to the same destination, then perhaps the greatest mystery is no longer what will happen, but who will still be standing when the truth is finally revealed? Since 2020, we've all assumed the same thing. Mondstadt, Liyue, Inazuma, Sumeru, Fontaine, Natlan, Snezhnaya, Chapter 8. The end of Genshin Impact, but what if we've been wrong this entire time? One detail has always stood out. Hoyoverse never called this roadmap the Genshin Impact storyline. They call it the Teyvat chapter. At first, that might seem insignificant, but words matter, especially in Genshin Impact, because if this is only the Teyvat chapter, then by definition another chapter can exist. From the very beginning, the Traveler was introduced as someone from beyond this world, a descender, someone untouched by Irminsul, someone who existed before arriving in Teyvat. And that raises an important question. Why would a story about a traveler from another world end the moment they finish exploring just one? Chapter 8 isn't the end of Genshin Impact, but it's the end of Teyvat. Think about everything Hoyoverse has introduced over the years. The Senders, the Primordial One, the Heavenly Principles, the Dark Sea, Other Worlds, and the False Sky. These ideals all point beyond the borders of Teyvat. They suggest a universe far larger than the 7 nations we've explored. If that's true, then Chapter 8 may not conclude the Traveler's journey. It might finally begin. We've heard the phrase countless times, the sky is fake.
The stars, the sky, it's all a gigantic hoax. A lie.
Let me ask you, have you in all your mighty knowledge ever heard the rumor that the skies of Teyvat are fake?
False sky.
At first, it sounded like a mysterious line meant to spark theories, but over time, more and more evidence has pointed towards the idea that Teyvat is not what it appears to be. If the Traveler uncovers the truth in Chapter 8, then perhaps escaping Teyvat becomes the next objective. Not because their journey is over, but because the real universe is waiting beyond it. There's another possibility, one Hoyoverse has quietly hinted at for years. What if Chapter 8 doesn't end with victory? What if humanity loses? Think back to the Cataclysm. Khaenri'ah fell, civilizations vanished, entire histories were erased. Genshin has never been afraid of tragic endings. What if Chapter 8 ends the same way? Not with peace, but with another catastrophe. One that forces the traveler to leave Teyvat behind. Imagine the final moment. The truth about Celestia has been revealed. The war is over. The fate of Teyvat has been decided. The traveler looks towards the stars once again, not searching for their sibling, but searching for the next world, because perhaps this was never the story of Teyvat. It was the story of a traveler passing through it. If that's true, then Chapter 8 isn't the conclusion we've been waiting for. It's the prologue to something much bigger. Not the end of Genshin Impact, but the end of the Teyvat chapter. For years, Genshin Impact has felt like a journey across 7 nations. But perhaps that was never the real story. Perhaps every Archon quest, every Harbinger, every nation and every war was simply preparing us for the moment when humanity finally stands against the heavens. Whether that battle ends in freedom or another cataclysm remains to be seen. But one thing is certain, the world of Teyvat is changing, and after this teaser, there is no turning back. Thanks for watching Quest Archives, I'm Lunatic, and I hope you like this video, and see you in the next one.